all right? It's Constitution Day. We have the best Constitution in the entire world, probably in history, arguably. We are the best country in history, but it's because we've always been active and we understood out there 1 Chronicles 12:32, which clearly says that the sons of Issachar, they knew the signs of the time and what to do about it. They had the knowledge of what to do about it. And that's why you're here tonight, because you're going to learn what to do about it.
Amen.
Our country is headed in the wrong direction right now in many respects. Even when President Trump tried to do everything he possibly can, it really is headed in the wrong direction. It's going to take all of us as a team, not just one person or two people. It's going to take all of us as a team to steer us back on course and head off this intentional evil. So I thank you for being here tonight, number one. And number two, I want you to be encouraged. All this negative press that was out there on things like Liberty State, people in the thousands showed up at the Spokane County Fair. They had record turnout, by the way. Showed up at the Spokane County Fairgrounds because of the bad press to sign a petition to rebuke the bad press. That's encouraging. And number three, thanks to the efforts of the next speaker, their original agenda was to take America down on her 200th birthday, 1776 to 1976. But they failed. Then it was going to be 1994, and they failed at that. Then it was going to be Agenda 21, but they ran out of time yet again, and now it's Agenda 2030. So we are effective, and we are winning, aren't we? We're pushing it back, and it's going to be Agenda 2040 and Agenda 2050, and as long as they keep moving the number back, praise God, because we're still free, right?
Amen.
So the speaker tonight, most of you know, but he really made Agenda 21, and not just property rights, but all of the other things that came along with it. A household name, brought it into modern parlance. He's the president of the American Policy Center, and also probably one of the most tireless activists out there that is organizing around the country against incredible odds and against incredible money that is being thrown by the George Soroses, etc. of the world. Our good friend and a great activist and a great human being and patriot on Constitution Day, Tom DeWeese. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. I am so pleased to see all of you here tonight. And I have a message for you tonight, and the number one message is we are in a situation in this country, time is short. Our republic is in great danger, and now is the time we have to get out of our seats and start to fight. We have to get mad, we have to get concerned, and we have to take action. And what I intend to do tonight is tell you exactly what you're up against, why this is happening, and I've got some ideas on what to do about it. And I want to help. I mean, you go to our website, we've got tools there to help you. We can give you all the background and so forth. But we've got to take the action. The reason that we continue to lose is because we don't show up. The other side is there all the time. And when you go down there and you go to a meeting and nothing happens and you go home and say, well, I tried. And then you don't go back. The other side's sitting there going, okay, they're gone. Now let's go on into it. And it never changes. And I'll tell you later on, we're working on something new that I think will excite you. And I think it's the atom bomb on our side, how we're going to win. I will not let people who are so stupid that they continue to put policies in place that have never, ever, ever worked. And yet they continue to push those. I refuse to give up our freedom, our liberty, our republic to idiots like that. And so tonight, I hope to rally you so that you will begin to take the action that needs to be done to save the United States of America and our freedom. Free enterprise. individualism, private property. These three things encompass all of the principles of freedom. Take away any one of them, and freedom begins to be diminished. Our founding fathers built the very foundation of this nation on those three things: free enterprise, individualism, private property. These three truths of life define you as a unique individual, free to engage in commerce and benefit from its fruits of your own personal labor. And they provide you with a direct path to building personal wealth and a life of your own. That's what freedom is. Free enterprise, individualism, private property. These are the reasons why the United States grew into the envy of the world, why millions sought to come here, and why we quickly surpassed ancient nations in prosperity and a standard of living. But I'm here to tell you that there is a massive force that's out there working to eliminate those principles of freedom from our culture and our system of government, because they are so selfish. They want to control every single action you take. They don't want you to eat anything they don't want you to eat. They don't want you to live anywhere they don't want you to live. They want you to live exactly the way they decide. That is not freedom. I'm sure that you can see it, but perhaps you aren't sure what is really happening or why. One result is that our culture, our way of life is being changed. Most notably, our government is changing, especially at the local level. It's changing from the way that you perceive it, changing in its makeup, and it's changing the way it operates. How? Why? Who is behind it? Well, quickly I'll tell you, there is a policy that you have heard. You hear it all the time, coming out of your television sets, coming out of your elected officials, looking at every single website, every document you look at. It's called sustainable development. You hear the term used, especially in the discussion about local development and farming practices and energy use. We're told it's just a good conservation practice to protect the environment and have a good plan for future development. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is not true.
Amen.
What is true is that sustainable development is the official outgrowth of an international plan called Agenda 21.
Yes.
Now, the main fact that I just said those words has just put tinfoil in my head. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm a nutcase. Well, you know what? I didn't bring it with me tonight because they're too heavy to carry around with me, but I've got documents. One of them is a 70-page document that was written in 1997 by the United States to the United Nations. And what it is a 5-year report on the progress of the implementation of Agenda 21 in the United States. But it's just a conspiracy theory, you understand. Yeah. Well, now there are legions of officials, representatives of international non-governmental organizations, and a slew of other people that will tell you Agenda 21 is a myth. And pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, me. For talking about Agenda 21, I have of course been called everything from a nutcase to a domestic terrorist. Frankly, the Southern Poverty Law Center has done 4 separate reports on me, and I'm very proud of that. I got their attention. And they're the ones discredited, not me. But when it was first introduced to the world at the UN's Earth Summit in 1992, there were 50,000 delegates that proudly announced that Agenda 21 was, quote, a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society.
Yeah.
Think about that. That is the most powerful description of a policy aimed at all of us that I have ever heard. A comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. And to introduce the plan, the Earth Summit chairman, Maurice Strong, boldly proclaimed, quote, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. And you see today, everywhere you look, attacks on every single one of those things. But it's just a myth. Today, it gets worse. In support of the plan, David Brower of the Sierra Club, Sierra Club is one of the authors of Agenda 21 at the UN, said, quote, "Childbearing should be a punishable crime against society unless the parents hold a government license." Whoa. And he went on to say that everybody else had to be chemically fixed so they couldn't bear children unless they got approved by the government, and the government would fix that.
Well, how's that go with the Catholic Church?
Well, obviously it doesn't. Except now, well, sustainable development policies are designed to achieve all of those goals. So how is it changing your government? Well, there are three main points of attack through the enforcement of sustainable policy. First, destroy private property ownership and control. 2, impose regional councils, taking government further away from the people, regional councils. And 3, feed the plan with federal grant money. It all starts right here at our local level. If you attend local government meetings, you will hear a completely new language that's being used. You're going to hear them sitting there talking over and over again about wetlands, conservation easements, watersheds, viewsheds, rails to trails, biosphere reserves, greenways, carbon footprints, partnerships, preservation, stakeholders, civil society, land use, environmental protection, development, diversity, visioning, open space, heritage areas, and comprehensive planning. It's all part of this new language that we're dealing with. What you will rarely hear are references to private property, free enterprise, or consideration of individual choice, how you want to live your life. You also notice a lot of faces that aren't really local people, you don't recognize them, who seem to be wielding a whole lot of influence during the meetings. In fact, you may notice that your elected representatives give them a lot of attention. Well, who are they? They are planners and representatives of private organizations or non-governmental organizations, NGOs as we call them. They call themselves stakeholders. You will see in the documents that they create, the comprehensive plans and so forth, start looking through them, start looking through the minutes of meetings, and it'll say, for the council or whatever, saying, well, we met with the stakeholders. Now, most people think you're the stakeholders. You're the ones that have to live under it. These guys don't even live here. They are carpetbaggers.
Amen.
In fact, you will find representatives of these same organizations in every single local government meeting in the nation. They are, in fact, national and many times international organizations with the goal of, oh golly, reorganizing human society. Many of them working through Bill Clinton's President's Council on Sustainable Development helped to write the federal grant programs. That's how that suggestion of Agenda 21 became national policy. Now what they'll say to you, if you go to talk to somebody about Agenda 21, they will tell you that, well, it's just a suggestion. It has no enforcement capability, just an idea. Well, Agenda 21 was a soft law policy, which means it didn't have to be ratified by the Senate, so it didn't become law of the land that way. But the way it turned around was the President's Council on Sustainable Development. On this council were a bunch of these NGO organizations, the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the World Wildlife Fund, several more. Representatives of almost every single federal agency were on there as well, and the heads of several global corporations. Enron was one of them, economic geniuses. There they were, pulling all this together with the express purpose of creating that suggestion into American policy. The NGOs wrote the grants, the same NGOs that wrote Agenda 21 in the first place. And in those grant programs are specific details that are the implementation of sustainable development or Agenda 21 policies. That's how it came from the international level to a suggestion to the law of the land that is now in your backyard. Because those same NGOs, once they did all this, they flocked into your communities, into your city councils, your county commissions. They surrounded them and they presented them with these plans. They put it all right there and they said, got the money for you too. It's all right here in the box. And that's the way it all comes down. And that is why in every single community in this nation, the exact same policies are being put in place, and all the while, your city councilmen, your county commissioners are saying, it's all local, local, local. The people of our community decided it. Anybody here anybody ever been there and said, hey, sounds good to me, I'm for it? Anybody?
Yes.
No. So, the policies of those grants have led to the creation of something called, oh golly, stakeholder councils. They in turn are run by the same NGOs that help write the grants, and they direct policy on how the grant money is to be used. One of the things they do, an organization called ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, helped write Agenda 21 at the UN level, they pledged, their goal then was to bring Agenda 21 into every community in the world. And what they do is they come in, we're paying them grant money, understand? That's how they live off of this. They're coming in and they bring in computer programs and training programs. Their goal is to get every single employee at City Hall thinking sustainably. This is how they operate. This is what they're doing with that grant money. So, next, under their influence, the NGOs, the community government announces a new vision for future development and how your town is about to change drastically. Oh, we're going to change everything. Now you'll find the establishment of water councils, energy councils, development councils, and land councils, all designed to control the use of all these vital needs, all run by non-elected bureaucrats who do not care what your problem is. And there's no vote. There's nobody. Have they put the comprehensive plan up for a vote and said, have the community vote for it? No. Hasn't happened anywhere in the country. The result, private property rights of the owners begin to disappear. As land use becomes tightly controlled, taxes are used as a tool to control energy use. Community development begins to mean that the use of eminent domain to tear down neighborhoods and replace them with pack and stack high-rise housing. More importantly, as the grants and the NGOs, who are calling themselves the stakeholders, begin to take hold of the community, watch how the function of legitimate elected government within the sustainable system fast becomes little more than a rubber stamp to create and enforce the dictates of the non-elected stakeholder councils. And by the way, that where they call themselves the stakeholders, again, they're telling you that they are the ones who are making all the rules. It is the demise of representative government. Once the councils are established, and what I was going to say, I'm telling, bringing it out of my head, the civil society line that they use, civil society. They call themselves civil society. And at the UN, they talk about reforming the UN. What they intend to do when they reform the UN is get rid of the Security Council, the only place where we have a vote to stop anything. Get rid of all that and create an assembly for the people. And the representatives of this, our representatives, are civil society, the NGO organizations. They are our representatives at the UN once we establish a global governance. Anybody pay their Sierra Club dues lately?
No.
So, Now the councils begin to grow and expand in power. Eventually, regional councils are established, made up of non-elected members, as I said, that are supposed to represent whole areas, sometimes as many as 10 or 15 counties, all working to impose the same policies to every community under one umbrella, regional councils. Regionalism is designed to undermine and replace locally elected representation. It takes government further from the people, step by step by step. There are programs today, specifically out of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which will automatically put your community into a region. In some cases, local governments aren't even aware that they're in this regional council until they all of a sudden are told they have to obey specific rules. The regional councils are usually the ones to apply for the grants, yet they affect everyone in the community, in the system, every community. I worked with a lady in Dayton, Ohio, Jenny Granado, who had a historic farmhouse that was built by an 1812 general. And it should have been on historic sites, but it wasn't. And they were going to widen the road, the highway in front of her house. In front of her house, she had a big hedge there that divided from the highway. And her mother had a favorite magnolia tree that was sitting right there. She liked to sit and swing underneath there and just enjoy it. And the word came that they were going to widen the highway, and oh yeah, they were going to put a bike trail in front, alongside the highway. They didn't know when this was going to happen, and all of a sudden one day, Jenny's mother heard a commotion outside. She came outside just in time to see a bulldozer take down her magnolia tree. Jenny's mother literally grabbed her chest and fell over and died from it. They built that bicycle highway. It's not a path, it's a highway within 7 feet of Jenny's front door, where her house becomes literally useless. She can't sell it, it's hard to live in it, she's still there. She went to the county commissioners to ask for some kind of retribution, whatever. They said, oh, we didn't do that, it was a regional council. So she goes to the regional council and said, oh, we don't do anything but just ask for the grants. No one was responsible. This is how American government is beginning to operate. You're going to hear a lot of terms. The grants dictate rules, regulations, money to urban and rural communities across the country, enforcing code revision, transit-oriented development, so-called affordable housing, corridor planning, green building codes, international codes for electrical and plumbing regulations, and the enforcement of so-called climate change policy. And you'll hear a lot of terms cast about in the decision about the visioning plan, all the while you're being assured that everything is local. Local, 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 local. That's what we always hear. I can tell you, if you go on the internet and you look up Dubai 2050 and Jamaica 2050, you will find exactly the same plan as the Coeur d'Alene Envision plan. One of the NGOs that operates is called form-based codes. How many have driven around the country, gone to different parts of the country, and see that everything starts to look alike? Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of buildings are all starting to look alike. Form-based codes, keep that in mind. For example, this is an NGO program that is growing fast in many communities. The goal, they say, is, quote, a means of regulating land development to achieve a specific urban form. Translation, form-based codes is a plan to control the design, structure, and character of buildings so that they will all be built and look exactly alike. Form-based codes, according to their own literature, are regulatory and not advisory, and therefore enforceable based on international building codes. You tried to talk them out of it? Well, we had to do this. Took the grant. There's another one called What Works Cities. Now, the first thing we do with our elected officials when we get them in there is we send them off to these national meetings National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, the National Governors, or Governors Association, Mayor, whatever. And what they hear there are the exact same NGO organizations that wrote all this in the first place saying, we've got all the plans right here, got sample legislation for you. And one of those is what works cities. Because this is what's been done here and there and everything. You don't even have to think anymore. We've got all the details. This NGO operation supplies communities with workshops, training, data, all the information and evidence needed to guide our city into the right programs. The ones that work. By adopting the What Works City standards, a community becomes part of the national network of local government. So much for local rule. Still, in force out of HUD is an Obama leftover called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, AFFH. Cities receiving HUD AFFH grants are required to complete an assessment of fair housing. That requires cities to analyze occupancy data including race, color, religion, national origins, and much more in every neighborhood every 5 years. And using that information, HUD declares perhaps your community has an imbalance. In a neighborhood, you don't have enough of this race or this religion or what the case may be. Nobody knows what the formula is to make that balance. HUD makes it up as they go. So, if you're out of balance, then you're out of compliance with the grant unless you solve the imbalance. There are communities in this country that don't have enough of certain races or certain criteria in there. They are advertising in other cities saying, please move here so we can be in balance. Thereby, community independence and local elections are sacrificed to HUD agents. If you're out of balance, the HUD agents are going to start running your city. In Envision, Coeur d'Alene, there are several aspects of AFFH rules, faith-based codes, and what works cities, including a call for analysis of housing conditions and needs, provisions for low-cost housing, analysis of transportation corridors, transit lines, and the rights-of-ways, which is nothing but doublespeak for light rail train systems, bike lanes that make the roadways more narrow for cars, landscaping, and building design. It's all in there, in the plan. And they will tell you it's all local, but it's not. And they use the force of eminent domain to recreate your community into the image envisioned in those codes and those development plans. In California, where such plans are well underway, we can see where it's all headed. Berkeley just banned gas stoves and heaters. Within 10 years, every home must have solar panels installed in California. New apartment buildings no longer provide parking lots. Step by step, it expands. This is what local officials are telling you is a local plan. This is what a comprehensive blueprint is in action. This is what regional planning really is. Step by step. They may have, we'll just do this today. We were looking at a design today, making a neighborhood look pretty nice, pretty nice. But that's the beginning to get you in. Once the plan's in place, pretty soon, well, gee, we got this problem, that problem, got to do this, got to do that. It all changes. As groups like the American Planning Association push the process, voluntary guidelines announced to reduce energy use quickly become mandatory regulations as dictated through the grant programs. Today, across the nation, throughout the world, there are regional visioning programs, putting them in place. They always end, as I said before, with the numbers like 2030, 2040, 2050. That's your first clue. They are all the exact same plans, no matter where they are in the world. The one thing they all have in common is none of them are local. I cannot say that enough, even if you're tired of hearing it. That's by design. They say it's all local because most of them are being implemented by the same planners nationwide, fueled by the same grant programs and aided by the same NGO groups. Smart growth is a term you hear most often. The use of the term smart, by the way, does not mean intelligent or unique of scientific or, whatever people think. The word smart is actually an engineering acronym, meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-oriented. SMART. In other words, it means a controlled outcome in a specific amount of time. Smart growth planners promote their schemes by insisting that Americans live the wrong way. And they use land use regulations to impose on others what they insist is the right way. And here's how it works. The planners put a line around the community. These are called urban growth boundaries. Put that line around the community and declare that little or no growth will take place outside of that line. That's urban sprawl, and we can't have that. So, that means the focus for future housing will be for high-density neighborhoods living in high-rise housing. It means the use of private cars. There's no room for the cars anymore. How many times have you been in a car listening to the radio or somebody's on a talk show talking about how all the traffic jams and so forth, we could eliminate all that. And we just have public transportation, we have bike lanes, we have all this. And they're hoping that as you're sitting there disgusted in the traffic jam, that you're going to say, yeah, let's do that. That's why they always do that at drive time, by the way. Most plans include a program called the Complete Street. This is an edict that cars must share the road with bicycles, pedestrians, and probably skateboarders. Remember when we were kids? That we were taught before you crossed the street, what did you do? Watch, look, listen. Right? And then you went to walk. What do we have today? Every single place you go now, there are crosswalks and so forth that you can just, you're a pedestrian, you just walk across there. And the cars are supposed to stop. Now you've got a driver coming down the road. First of all, there's a bike lane over here, and he's trying to avert, the road's more narrow than it used to be, and he's trying to avert that. Now there comes somebody else coming over here, maybe some of those people in the grocery carts at the, in the aisle at grocery where they're driving down through there and you got to dodge them. Some of them escaped from the grocery and got out into the bike lane and you got to avoid them too. And you got to get out of the way of all these guys. And all of a sudden somebody comes walking across the street and you've got to watch out not to hit them. And they call that making the road safer.
Yeah, sure.
I am much happier to stand there and wait till the traffic clears and walk. I'm actually annoyed every time I'm standing there and a car stops, like, I gotta run, gotta cross. I feel obligated that I gotta get out of his way. This is all designed to reduce your ability to drive so that you use bikes for short trips and public transportation, including expensive light rail trains for any long distance, which may or not be going where you need to go when you need to go. Now, for over 20 years, Oregon has been enforcing urban growth boundaries, part of their smart growth policy. Here's what they didn't count on. The urban growth boundaries assure the area of the city doesn't expand, but what happens when the population does? The only way to grow is up. That means there is no room for single-family homes with backyards for the kids. According to the rhetoric of the sustainabilists, the only solution is to flood single-family neighborhoods with duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters. They call this upzoning. Says Oregon House Speaker Kotek, the state housing crisis requires a combination of bolder strategies. I love how these self-described intellectuals who are leading us down this path always use the words bolder, innovative, and master plan to make their destructive policies urgent and brave. But they never use the words property rights. The truth is, they are pushing their own political agenda And when they get caught with their unworkable plans, they pretend to offer a solution to their own idiotic regulations which they created. My hero. For example, Portland, Oregon has long been the poster child for the shining example of the genius of smart growth, praised in government and environmental meetings across the country. Smart growth is an utter failure, as property rights have been destroyed, housing costs have skyrocketed, and now there is a housing crisis. There's no room for people to have backyards for their kids. We could put 100 families in that space. We have a crisis. Now, why has smart growth failed? Because over the years, under smart growth, Portland's population has grown by over 80%. But the legislators have only allowed the urban growth boundary to be expanded by no more than 6%. Now, Portland has a housing crisis, and so we must abolish selfish, racist, single-family homes. The answer, they say, is to build apartment buildings in the single-family neighborhoods. Imagine what these policies will do to your property values, your equity, all that you've worked for. In New York City, the home of all the genius people, they implemented what is called progressive street projects. They built more than 400 miles of new bike lanes, and they created a massive pedestrian plaza in Times Square by closing 5 blocks of Broadway to cars, a place that was already jammed. The announced purpose was, you ready? To change the culture. The pedestrian plazas are placed in the center of what were once busy streets, blocking off traffic and again making it difficult to drive in the city, which is almost impossible anyway. But here, promise the planners, people can congregate, sit at tables in an outdoor atmosphere and enjoy each other rather than rushing around by themselves in cars. One of the leaders of this project said, quote, "What we're trying to do is see equity of public space. When you build your streets for cars, you're actually building in the expectation that people are going to have cars." End quote. So you see, stop having streets, obviously people will stop wanting cars. She went on to explain, quote, "It costs $10,000 per year for a household to own and maintain a car. We're talking about building an affordable option for people to get around." That's social justice. That's redistribution of wealth. It's none of their business. It's all designed to reduce your ability to drive so that you will use bikes for short trips and public transportation, including light rail trains. And it's more. Sustainable development is an all-out attack on private property. Private property is in their way. It's in their way as they sit there behind their closed doors to make their plans for your future. Last year, the lead genius in New York, Bill de Blasio, mayor, said this in an interview in New York Magazine. He said, quote, "What's been hardest is the way our legal system is structured to favor private property. I think people all over the city, of every background, would like to have the city government be able to determine which buildings go where, how high they will be, who gets to live there, and what the rent will be."
Oh boy.
He actually said that. Now tell me if you've heard this. How many of you have gone to planning meetings and so forth? Good. And what do you hear them talking about? You hear them talking about, why do we need these plans? Well, we need to make sure that we plan for the future. We don't want to have chaotic growth of the community, right?
Yeah.
Is that the words you hear?
Yes, yeah.
Listen to this quote. "The chaotic growth of cities will be replaced by a dynamic system of urban development. The region is formed by the economic interdependence of its development from the industrial complex to the industrial region. The region has a single system of transportation, a centralized administration, and a united system of education and research. Sound familiar?
Yes.
This was written in 1968 by a Soviet-Russian architect named Alexei Gutenov in a document entitled The Ideal Communist City. Could it be that sustainable development really is an extension of the master plan for the ideal communist city? Oh, no, no, no. Oh, give him another pile of tin foil. What a nutcase. Of course, I'm not the one who said that, am I? Your local elected officials, planning groups, they all deny it. It's all local, local, local. So why is it that our local elected representatives keep imposing this, and why won't they listen to you when you come to complain?
Amen.
Because they are surrounded by the NGOs, the planners, the federal agents, all feeding off the federal grants that enforce the predetermined plan to reorganize your city. Non-elected regional councils should never have the power to commit local elected governments to policies or regulations. They must only be done by actual elected bodies like the city council or county commission, people that you elected for the job. That's the point of the election. But this is how government is spiraling out of control. These are not the actions of a free society. Americans are guaranteed the right through the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution to be secure in your homes. The problem is not traditional zoning and planning. The problem is the emergence of raw government power that is unchecked and out of control as it ignores individual liberty and private property rights. Further, we see more and more governments armed with the federal grants imposing arbitrary rules that try to enforce a one-size-fits-all straitjacket on everyone regardless of individual situations. And more government power leads to what? More government corruption. Even if you believe that there needs to be changes in our society to protect the environment, surely any honest American would admit that such actions by government are out of line. Yet, as Americans are being forced to live this way, all under the excuse of environmental protection, here is the kicker. Keep this in mind. The little-known fact that none of it is necessary because it doesn't work. A few years ago, the American Planning Association did a study to see if all of their effects to enforce smart growth worked. The APA's own study reported that smart growth does not work. Here is the final concluding paragraph of the APA-sponsored study. Quote, "The current planning policy strategies for land use and transportation have virtually no impact on the major long-term increases in resources and energy consumption. They generally tend to increase costs, reduce economic competitiveness. In many cases, the socio-economic consequences of less housing choices, Portland, crowding, and congestion may outweigh the very modest CO2 reduction benefits." End quote. Sustainable development is an international scheme disguised as a national and local policy created to rein in the radical ideas of individualism and private property and harmonize all nations into a central global control. That is what sustainable development is. And if we allow it to control our system of our government, then it will result in a dark ages unlike anything ever experienced in human society. Isn't it significant to see that as private property comes under attack through sustainable development, that our country is also becoming less wealthy and less free? You know, one of the main things that's used to measure our economy, the economists do this, they're looking at housing starts. How many housing starts? Economy's good. Housing starts are down? Uh-oh. They're all on alarm right now that housing starts are down. Duh!
Yeah.
Why do you think they're down? You're banning them.
Yeah.
How is it that these geniuses with all these degrees can't understand that? Oh, they went to Harvard, that was fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It is essential that every one of you understand that these leading issues that we face today are not just random concerns that accidentally find their way into the forefront of political debate. They are all interconnected to the policies of Agenda 21, sustainable development, and the restructuring of our way of life. To achieve such a goal, to save the planet, it is necessary to eliminate national sovereignty and independent nations. Eliminating national borders quickly has led to the excuse for openly allowing the natural migration of peoples. This is their line for illegal immigration, the natural migration of people. The UN Commission on Global Governance clearly outlined the goal for global control, stating, quote, "The concept of national sovereignty has been immutable, indeed a sacred principle of international relations. It is a principle which will yield only slowly and reluctantly to the new imperatives of global environmental cooperation." No wonder a presidential candidate who uses the slogan, "Make America Great Again," drives them up the wall.
Amen.
Now why, getting down to the nitty-gritty, why do they use the excuse of environmental protection to enforce their agenda of control? Because the environment doesn't respect political boundaries. Rivers run through several states, animal habitats and bioregions run through multiple regions and counties. So this is it's useful to break through the political boundaries of our nation, our state, our county. And what other boundary? Oh yeah, the one that goes around your yard.
Yeah.
All in the name, their main weapon to put all this in place, the threat of environmental Armageddon. It doesn't matter what rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. I've had Greens say that to me. It's particularly manifested through the charge of man-made global warming, later to conveniently become climate change. It doesn't matter if true science refuses to cooperate to this scheme, or actual temperatures really are not rising, and there continues to be no evidence of any man-made effect on the climate. Truth hasn't been important to these scaremongers. Timothy Worth, the president of the United Nations Foundation, said, quote, "We've got to ride this global warming issue. Even if the theory of global warming is wrong, we will be doing the right thing in terms of economic and environmental policy." To further drive home their complete lack of concern for truth, Paul Watson of Greenpeace declared, "It doesn't matter what is true, it only matters what people believe is true." So in their zealotry to enforce the grand agenda, social justice became the moral force over the rule of law, as free enterprise, private property, rural communities, and individual consumption habits became the targets, labeled as racist and as social injustice. Such established institutions of our culture and our free market economies were seen as obstructions to the plan. And so, traditional family units, religion, and those who were able to live independently in rural areas, another threat. Of course, the real goal of global governance has to be hidden from the American people. If the plan was to be successfully imposed, they called it a suggestion, as I said earlier, or voluntary, just in case the nation or the community, we just have this in case you want to do it, here it is. However, as we, the opponents, started to gain some ground in exposing its true purpose, and citizens began to storm city halls protesting local implementation, suddenly the once proud proponents lost their collective memories about Agenda 21. Never heard of it. There are no blue helmeted troops at City Hall. It's all just local, local, local. And then they would say, oh, you mean that innocuous 20-year-old document that has no enforcement capability? Oh, this isn't that. These are the excuses that rain down on us from the planners, NGOs, and government agents as they scramble to hide their true intentions. The American Planning Association, oh, my favorite group. I love these guys. They are such cowards that the minute that we start to bring opposition, they panic. The first thing they did as we began to take hold was organize a boot camp to retrain its planners to deal with us using a glossary for the public, teaching them new ways to talk about planning. This is the opening line of this thing. It says, given the heightened scrutiny of planners by some members of the public, what is said or not said is especially important in building support for planning. Now, why do they keep changing the names? Why do they keep... The glossary went on to list words not to use in public anymore because this makes the critics see red. Words like visioning, stakeholders, density, smart growth, don't use those anymore. We're just going to have a conversation with the people. One of the things they do in their facilitated meetings is they'll hold up a photograph of a nice looking neighborhood and another one of a horrible looking ghetto. And they'll say, which one do you like? Well, the crowd says, I like the pretty one, please. You support planning. Yeah, right. Wasn't planning over here in this ghetto? This has been our fight. Stop this assault on our culture and our constitutional rights. Over the years, since the introduction of Agenda 21 in 1992, the United Nations has created several companion updates to the original documents. This practice serves two purposes. One is to give out more detail on how the plan is to be implemented. The second is to excite their activists with a new rallying cry. In 2000, the UN held the Millennium Summit, launching the Millennium Project featuring 8 goals for global sustainability to be reached by 2015. Then when those goals were not achieved, the UN held another summit in New York City in September of 2015, this time outlining 17 goals to be reached by 2030. Now they were the exact same goals, they just kind of cut them up a little bit in a little more detail in them. So this document became known as the 2030 Agenda. Now lots of times I talk about Agenda 21, there's always somebody who says, no, now today is Agenda 2030. It's all the same. They just keep adding these things to it. And so now we have Agenda 2030. But now, 2019, enter the Green New Deal.
Oh, God,
Representing the boldest tactic yet. The origins and the purpose of the Green New Deal couldn't be more transparent. The forces behind the agenda have boldly thrown off their cloaking devices, all that easy-sounding wording they're using. They've tossed it all out all their innocent-sounding arguments that they just want to protect the environment and make it better life for us all. Instead, they are now openly revealing that their goal is socialism and global control, just as I've been warning for the past 27 years. Now, they are determined to take congressional action to make it all law of the land. The Green New Deal is a tax on everything we do, make, wear, eat, drink, drive, import, export, and even breathe. The Green New Deal calls for the elimination of the internal combustion engine. Always higher and higher taxes will be used to get the public to voluntarily reduce their use of their cars. That's how it works, slow but steady. The Green New Deal calls for government control of every single home, office, and factory. They have said we need to tear down or retrofit every building in America and to comply with massive environmental energy regulations. Most recently, I've been working with the beef industry. It is in direct target for elimination. It will start with mandatory decreases in meat consumption until it disappears from our daily diet. The consumption of dairy will follow. It is unbelievable to me that the National Beef Association, Cattlemen's Association, has allowed the World Wildlife Fund to take over their industry. An organization, the most powerful environmental organization in the world, who has said in their platform that we must end beef consumption to save the planet. And here is the National Cattlemen's Association allowing them to come in and create the Global Beef Sustainable Roundtable, which has rules and regulations that will not allow American beef industry to exist. Part of the plan for Agenda 2030 is zero economic growth. Believe it or not, that's what they called it, zero economic growth. The Green New Deal calls for a massive welfare plan where no one earns more than anyone else. Incentive to get ahead is dead. New inventions would disrupt their plans for a well-organized, controlled society. So where will the jobs come from? After we ban manufacturing, shut down more stores, stop single-family home construction, close the airline industry, and severely regulated farms and the entire food industry. This is their answer to the hated free markets and individual choice. So, there you have it. Agenda 21, the Millennium Project, Agenda 2030, the Green New Deal. Progress in the world of progressives. They warn us from the beginning that their plan was the comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. And so it is to be, the total destruction of our way of life. The global sustainabilists are determined to win this fight. Learn this. Sustainable development is completely based on fear, on crisis. In every policy, it's based on dealing with an emergency. That's the tactic. That's why there is the violent reaction, the screaming, the crying to our opposition. It's the reason why you face such resistance when you try to oppose programs coming through your local governments. Amen. To all of these elected officials, these local, state, and federal officials who have smirked at all of those of us who have tried to sound the alarm, look around you now, hotshots. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has exposed every one of the lies about this, about environmental protection, and that all of these plans are just local, local, local. You know, I've been saying lately, she has done more in 1 year than I was able to do in 27 to try to alarm people. I'm going to give her an award. I'm going to give her a copter beanie, put a little tin foil on it. It's got a propeller on top, so it's environmentally correct, it's wind powered. I'm going to give her that. She has provided a valuable service to you and to me as we rise up to stop this. The tinfoil hats have been lifted from our heads, and now they're squarely on the elected officials who promote this stuff, and the NGOs and the rest of them. We have one choice if you want to restore our freedom. Fight. Fight for your homes, fight for your community, and I'm going to tell you, this is not easy. This is not something you just do in your spare time. It will take trench warfare in every city council meeting and in every county commission meeting. To fight back, you have to take control of the debate. Make your local officials answer to you. And here are some simple guidelines. This is where you get out the notebooks, notepads. Here are some simple guidelines to follow how to build an opposition. 1, first of all, do not do this alone. You need to get a core of at least 5 to 10 people and begin to organize as your core team. How many of you like to do research? This is really your thing. You want to get in there and find out. You are the most important people in the room. You are the ones that need to get into research. Who are the players in this? What are the contracts that are there? What plans, what vendors, what NGOs are involved? Look at the comprehensive plan. Go over it and see what neighborhood is going to be affected. How is this going to affect the entire community? Get that information. You've got to do that first to do this. You need to have 2 more people who are, these are what I call the, the ones who like punishment, the masochists of the group. You need to have at least 2 people who will go to every single public meeting and take notes, videotape, whatever you have to do to watch and figure out what's going on so you have it. With what you learn from attending and from the research, build a strategy and talking points and create handouts. As you go public with your fight, challenge the plans by exposing these facts, things you need to put out there, how it will harm the local economy. Expose how public-private partnerships are full of risk for the city. Public-private partnerships are not free enterprise working with government to just keep everything under control. Public-private partnerships are directly out of the Mussolini fascist playbook, and the government gets to hide behind the independence of the private businesses, and the private businesses get to basically help make the laws, do things that will put their competition out of business. They become your dictators. They use, public-private partnerships use their advertising budgets to sell the plan. What do you hear on TV constantly now? Oh, this is sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. That's the public-private partnerships promoting the plan and suckering you in. Talk about how it will increase the cost of property ownership and, in fact, the destruction of private property. Look in, as you're doing the research, look in the comprehensive plan for 2 words. Run together. Private property. You will not find it anywhere in there. Talk about how it will change the culture and the atmosphere of your town. How it will adversely affect zoning. We've already seen what's happened now in Oregon. Demand 3 bids of acquisition of any smart city technology. Expose any financial conflicts of interest. Think there are some? Methodically and consistently visit directly involved officials to discuss these plans. Make yourself known to them. This is the #1 thing we don't do. We don't like government, so we don't want to be there. So we don't go. All they hear from is the other side. You need to make them hear from you on a regular basis. You can make friends with them. They're not all bad people. They just don't get the truth. You can bring it. Organize an impromptu town hall meeting for citizens. Have your handouts, have your information. Tell them what's going on. As I said before, if there's a policy that you have found that one of the members or 2 or 3 of them are promoting, put documents together, put flyers, put placards together, put their picture on it and make them own it. Make them defend it. #1 goal. Stop your officials from taking the grants. #2, get a clear definition of property rights so you have a platform to stand on. We talk about property rights, but what do we mean? I'm going to give it to you. This definition was written by a Supreme Court Justice from the state of Washington, Richard B. Sanders, back in 1997, when they were starting to get more and more cases because of sustainable development on property rights, and he realized they didn't have a good definition, so he wrote this one. Quote, property in a thing consists not merely in its ownership and possession, but in the unrestricted right of use, enjoyment, and disposal. Anything which destroys any of the elements of property to that extent destroys the property itself. The substantial value of property lies in its use. If the right of use be denied, the value of the property is annihilated and ownership is rendered a barren right. When all you have is the right to pay the taxes and the mortgage, it is a barren right. When somebody else sitting behind closed doors is making all the plans, you have to have a permit for everything. You do not have property ownership. You are just a renter, basically. Private property ownership and its unrestricted right of use is the foundation for a nationwide revolution of freedom. Demand it. And don't be afraid of the word unrestricted. You want to see their heads blow off, use that word. I absolutely guarantee when you use that definition, they will counter by saying, if you have unrestricted right of use, somebody is going to build a smelly old pig farm next door to you. I'm not making that up. That is the exact thing I've heard used over and over again. They really hate pigs. Oh. Stop looking down in defeat. Stop believing that the other side is too powerful. Understand that they are terrified of the possibility that you will learn that they have power only so long as you believe they do.
Amen.
Their worst enemy is a bright spotlight on their corruption. It is time that we demand a government that treats property owners like owners, not chattel to be pushed around as they like. So how do you fight back? One fact is clear. They will not be able to establish sustainable development without destroying property rights. Stand up for property rights and we can stop sustainable development and put the cork back into government growth. You use that outline that I just read to you. You must understand, your fight must start on the local level, not in Washington, D.C. These forces pushing the sustainable agenda are deeply entrenched in every city. They are highly organized and massively funded, and they have one very specific goal. They intend to see it fulfilled and will stop at nothing to achieve it. Today, you and I face the most dangerous challenge to freedom since the start of the American Revolution. The author of these so-called local vision plans focus on their future for their view of your future. You need to do that too. What kind of future will you leave your children? When you think of your grandchildren, think of your great-grandchildren, and think of their great-grandchildren. What kind of nation will we leave for them? The choices that we make, the battles we choose to fight here and now will determine if they even understand that there is a concept of free enterprise, individualism, and private property rights. So the battle starts in your home, in your neighborhood, and in your community. The plan can and it must be stopped. You see, I fully believe if we can preserve your property rights, your individual expression, the free enterprise in your own community at the local level, then we can preserve it as a nation. Agenda 21, the Green New Deal, are all built on a house of cards, a house of lies. And they can be blown down in an instant when exposed. Be the wind. Thank you.